Welcome to my talk with Lori Shandro, co-founder and producer at Treefort Music Fest. We'll take a deep dive into all things Treefort with you today, and over the next 30 minutes, you can find out how you may own a piece of Treefort yourself. So why don't you give our audience and myself just a quick overview of what Treefort Music Fest is?
Treefort Music Fest is it's a citywide, mostly downtown, emerging music and culture and arts festival that happens usually the third week of March for around 5 days, and it involves a lot of local community as well as touring and traveling artists, musicians, speakers.
When did it start?
So a friend of mine and I started talking back in 2011 about the fact that we felt like there were a lot of emerging artists that we discovered that were coming through Boise on their way from one place to another, but they weren't playing here. And we decided to do a project, investigating the idea, doing a business plan on what it would take to build a venue that not only attracted and showcased those artists and showed them Boise and why they should be stopping here, but also giving the Boise emerging music fans somewhere to go, somewhere to see the artists they wanted to see. So he traveled around the country and interviewed different venue owners and looked at different cultures, and we wrote this business plan and then needed to figure out where to go next. And so the next thought was how to see if that market existed here and how to test it, and that's when we met Eric Gilbert, and he's famous here and everywhere for being just an amazing local musician as well as supportive of local musicians and touring regional, just a big part of the live music scene, and asked if he could help us produce a show.
Were you a musician at this time?
No.
Okay, so he was sort of the subject matter expert. Okay.
Right. I think that when I look back on it now, I think it's funny that my first thought was to just email the agent of a band that I saw was coming through here and see if we could have them stop and play. And it was, when I look back now, it was Tom Windish, one of the biggest agents at the time, and he said, "And who are you? And have you done this before?" And I told him what we were doing, and he said, "Let me give you some advice. You start small, start with local bands, get practiced, or find someone who's done this before."
So this was authentic advice. I thought this was going to a different direction. Okay,
no,
cool,
he said,
I'm in.
I had no idea we had no idea what we were doing, and he said, find someone in your community that's done this before that agents and artists would trust, so that you know that they know what they're doing, and so that's when we found Eric, and he had the idea of really just a one-day music festival that was really trafficking and attracting a lot of the emerging artists that were at South by Southwest, which is the weekend before. And if we could get them to route this way and play a one-day music festival highlighting them, it would be a lot more affordable and make a lot of sense.
So you played off of another anchor festival and then so Boise was sort of a drive-through town for a lot of these emerging artists, and you made Boise the venue town, the town to play a show? I don't know what to call it.
At that time, it wasn't the drive-through town from South by Southwest. Eric's idea was to give them somewhere to drive to and through on their way to wherever else they were going, to give them a destination to Seattle or Portland or Salt Lake or Denver on the way home from South by Southwest. And so we talked about it, and we said, all right, let's put together a budget and see what you can do. And he came back a couple of weeks later and said, well, I have enough interested artists to fill 3.5 days, basically. So we need a bigger parking lot.
That's pretty clever, though, to start the festival by mooching off of other festivals in a way. That's very bootstrappy, and to put it in startup terms. I just made that up. I don't know if bootstrappy is really a word. Okay, so you write a business plan. And by the way, I wouldn't have thought that Treefort Music Fest started around a business plan, which is pretty cool.
Well, not a business plan for a festival, a business plan for a venue. And the festival was really a way to grow the market, test the market, really put Boise on the map for these emerging artists.
Oh, so it started originally as around a venue, a physical location.
That was the ultimate idea, but we had to figure out if the market was here if our idea of talking to a market that we felt would trust us, as far as if we're bringing them here, then they don't have to know who it is. They know it's going to be someone that they'll like.
So you didn't want to build it to see if they would come. You made them come first, and then you decided whether you want to build it or not.
Right.
So you ended up not building this venue.
Not yet.
Somewhat, not yet? Okay. But what happened? Take me through sort of the growth years between the inception and where we are today with Treefort.
So that first year we started talking in October of 2011, and we ended up having the festival in March of 2012. And in that time, I think there was only one person that was a part of our team that had ever done what they do for a living for the festival. Everybody just came out of the community as being interested and passionate about what we were doing, which was highlighting Boise to emerging artists and highlighting emerging artists to Boise about their craft or about what they're interested, but everybody felt the same way about Boise. So we were like, we need a person that knows about production, we need a person that knows about stages and tents, we need a person that knows about hospitality and bringing together local restaurants and local brands that want to really treat out-of-towners the way Boise likes to treat people. And we found those people came up and they gave their heart and soul, and they gave their ideas. And so it really became a lot more than about concerts and music.
So there's a lot of quality control and curation. I mean, if you want to ensure people have a certain experience here in Boise, tell me a little bit about how you go about maintaining that kind of quality control in terms of the sponsorship side, for example.
I think everybody felt like we wanted it to represent Boise, and we wanted it to represent the community that put the festival on, and we wanted everything that was part of building the festival to feel like it was part of building the festival. And to your point about sponsorship, we've always been really wary of making that too big a part of the budget, because then you get entities and brands that have to get their money's worth, and usually their money's worth comes from their brand being the first thing people see. And that's really not what was special about Treefort. So we really worked hard on having participants, whether they're a musician or a speaker or a provider or a sponsor, feel like they're integrated into the festival, that they're part of making the festival happen, and they're not branding the festival. And so I think that is what keeps it feeling for people who are here, and also people who travel here, feeling like they're part of something special. They're part of something where it's an experience where you get to be together and experience what's around you, as opposed to being sold to or branded.
I have a take on that, because Trella does sponsor Treefort, or has sponsored in the past. We let you guys use our space, and in return, we become a sponsor. That's a very real example of how a nonprofit in the community got involved in the Treefort, and we get to experience Treefort by watching you guys meet here and have your big meetings with everyone. And we also hosted some events. I think it was the music industry talks that we had hosted here, and that was a really cool experience, a really good way for us to get involved. Our community too was able to relate to the content and the vibe and the culture that was in the space for that week. So I totally know what you're talking about in terms of getting the community involved.
And this space has been so amazing for us to come together and meet, because it allows us to be comfortable and work together in a big group and in small groups. And we had outgrown our little office in Hyde Park as far as sitting on each other's laps. And
when was that? What was sort of the tipping point in terms of maybe growth from the perspective of number of artists or number of venues or number of attendees? Was there a tipping point in sort of the early days where you guys went like, this is going to be sustainable, like we're onto something cool?
I don't know about that. I don't know about sustainable in a way, as far as, financially sustainable. Of course, we're always trying to make sure that people are getting paid to do what they do for a living, and that the people that are working on the festival, if it's not their hobby that they're doing as a passion, that they're paid in some way that works for them in their life. But what I think is special about how it's grown is that we take a look at what's available in downtown Boise. We use all of the venues, the music venues, the restaurants if we can, and even empty buildings, when we get opportunities to do something, to make something happen during the festival, we really have all of downtown to sort of make a stage of, and it's that kind of participation in that kind of way. The whole downtown becomes something different than what it is during the rest of the year, because we just get these opportunities, and we have so much flexibility because of the way Boise is to say, can we do this here? And in other cities, maybe the first response would be, well, that's not what we do. But here, you get the response of, well, I don't see why not. Let's talk about it. And so I think that, I don't know about the tipping point of us not being able to meet in our little office versus meeting here. Maybe that also became the tipping point between, I'm not sure we all know each other's names, but we all know why we're here.
So that's sort of how you knew you're growing fast, as you
Yeah.
didn't know everyone's name.
When you're like, who is that? But I know why they're here, but I'm strange to not know everybody in the room, but you know what they're doing here and why they want to be part of it.
So you turned Boise into a stage, literally and figuratively speaking, for a week. And look, like I've been going to Treefort for years. It's become such an iconic part of the city. I believe the Mayor McLean, last night even mentioned Treefort by name in her State of the City address. So it's very ingrained into the ethos of Boise. And so talk to me and the audience about the importance the community plays in Treefort Music Fest.
One thing we talk about every year is that things don't have to be the same every year, because Boise changes, the culture changes, what's happening in our world changes every year. And what we've realized is that it's okay to let things evolve because of the people who are involved and because of the difference in what's happening in our city and what's happening in our world. The festival kind of ends up really reflecting what's happening right now in Boise and what people need to express and what people need to hear. And I think that's what keeps it sustainable in a way that we're not trying to force something to be a certain way every year. It's shaped by the people that are building it.
It keeps it relevant that way.
Yeah, and it's something where I think people, they look forward to it because it's their time. It's all of our time to get together and to celebrate just being a city and being together with people that are here, people that have come here. And that looks a little different every year. And it's okay to not have to be set in how it's going to look and feel every year. It just evolves as the city evolves.
So like so many other, faithful attendees to Treefort, I was pretty bummed it didn't take place, and it didn't take place for obvious reasons. But talk to me about where Treefort stands now. When is the next Treefort going to be, and sort of the pivot that you guys are taking to pull that off? Talk to me about that.
So at the beginning of March, the first week or so of March, I think a lot of people still thought that this pandemic thing would blow over, or that maybe it was exaggerated. And I would say Eric Gilbert he's an amazing person in that he has his eyes and his ears on what's happening in so many other communities. And he felt like he started to feel first like this isn't going to be responsible. And we need to start thinking about that. And so we all started talking about what that would look like and what it would mean, and whether or not we got permission from the city, or whether or not the government said you can or can't. Is it the right thing to do? Are people going to feel comfortable? Are people going to be safe if we have this? Is it going to be what everybody comes for if they don't feel good? And so we decided to push it to September. This weekend, actually, is when it would have been, or last weekend. And at the time, I thought, that'll be awesome. It'll be in the fall. Everything will have blown over by then. And I just couldn't believe people who said that it still may not be okay by then. But it's kind of like when you're planning a wedding. If you get to the day before and you've made all of your deposits and you've planned everything and you've bought the dresses and you've
the cake's on the table.
Right, and the caterer's got everything made, and then you don't have the wedding, you don't get your money back. So the majority of the money that we spend on this festival goes to the people that prepare all year long and make it happen. And so we were in a position where when we decided we needed to push it not to next March, because we just didn't feel like that was responsible given what we're seeing, but to next September, we had to figure out how we're going to get from here to there.
That must have been a tough pill to swallow, to to decide to push it out all the way to September.
Yeah.
So tell me how you're going to get from here to there.
So I think that what we've learned is that there isn't any one stick or one solution to how this festival happens, and there also won't be that for how we solve this problem. There's lots of different things that contribute and lots of different ways that we can fill the hole, so to speak. One thing that is the most innovative way that we looked at is something that we looked at a couple of years ago, and it's a company called WeFunder. And it didn't really fit anything we felt like we needed at the time, but then when this happened and we had this problem that if we've been built by the community, we had a problem that we know the community wanted to help us fix. This WeFunder model seemed to be a potential solution, one of the solutions for that. And really what the company does is it allows founders, owners to give up a percentage of what they own to the community to invest in. So they say it's like the Kickstarter for investments. So the company gives up a percentage of the ownership for what's called micro investing. And so that allows people to, for as little as $100, to come and say, I want to help keep this community built, community oriented. We don't want to go look for one investor or one out-of-town solution to help solve this problem. The community can come and say, we believe in investing in our community. We believe in investing in this festival and its future and what it's going to do for our city and what it does for our culture. And so they can come and do that in a way that's accessible to most people at most levels, because you can buy investments as little as $100 without having to be a sophisticated, accredited investor. And that was one of the solutions we felt a lot of people would feel good about.
Oh yeah, and that's a big hurdle to be an accredited investor and be able to invest. So I can become a micro investor with $100,
right,
and own a piece of Treefort, but
yeah,
at the same time thereby support its existence going forward.
Right, and that's one piece of what we hope will be the solution, but also a piece that really allows a part of our community who has always felt very invested in the festival to really be invested in the festival and to have the ownership and the perks that come along with it. We've always had a very creative team, and some of the perks that go with investment at various levels I think are wonderful, but it's also recognition of the fact that these members of our community stepped forward and said, we own this emotionally and we want to help keep this here because it's part of who this city is.
It's fascinating. So it was built by the community, for the community, around community, and it's community that's going to have the opportunity to invest and keep it alive.
Right, and it's a good investment. If you think about it's hard for us to take credit for what Treefort has done and for who it's done and who's benefited. But
why? Tell me why.
I maybe it's just me, but I just feel like so many people and so many entities have been a part of. It wasn't any one of our one visions. It was everybody coming along and saying, I have an idea, and everyone coming together saying, let's see how we can make that happen. And so for us to say, Treefort is an awesome part of this community and it's a good investment, is a little bit like saying, it's not giving credit to how it was built, but that it's not a good time to think that way. We need to acknowledge how many people and how many businesses and how many entities both benefit from, profit from, survive from the fact that this festival happens. And that was part of the intention, is to make this city somewhere where you don't have to move to Portland or Seattle to do what you love.
Yeah, the economic impact and the peripheral businesses that benefit from it is huge every year, right?
We would love it if people could be, their whole existence could be what they want to do and that they love to do for a living, performing or making live music happen, or being a part of making their art happen. And that would be the best end goal.
So as you talk about this investment, something comes to mind, the term impact investment, right? So if I think about the ROI, you say it's a good investment, I wouldn't want to just think about a financial ROI, right? Because really the return, other than the potential financial return, is the fact that this gets sustained in the community and the community gets a benefit. Right. Quite frankly, I get to keep going and take my kids to Kidfort.
Right.
So that would be my return. So if I'm interested as a potential micro investor, what do I do? How do I buy?
So if you go to, it's wefunder.com/Treefort, or just wefunder.com, and you can search for Treefort. One of the best parts for us, the exercise of all the information we had to gather and put forth was really putting together all of the information, the financials, the stories, the impact, where we think the festival is going to go, and putting that all in one place. There's so much information there that you can read through, but it is an investment. It's not, you're right, it's an impact investment. If you're looking for something where you can buy and sell for a gain in a year or two, that's not the kind of investment this is, but it's the kind of investment where the return is having a better community and the city to live in that you envisioned and that you want to stay that way. Not to say that it's not financial. You do have a financial ownership, and the festival will continue to grow and not only be sustainable, but hopefully develop more opportunity and evolve, not just to survive this, but evolve through it to the other side where, this isn't going to be the last time this happens. So everyone needs to think about what is this going to look like on the other side? How much more are we going to appreciate being together, and how are we going to ensure, if this happens again, that we've planned for that? And so it's about allowing this entity to have the sustainability and the ability to evolve, not just to survive, but to really innovate through this to what's next.
So the fact that it happened is making you think about, what if this happens again? So you want to draw some lessons learned and not be caught off guard again. So the owners gave up equity. If I apply that sort of to the startup world, owners will give up equity at some point to go raise cash because they want to pour that cash back onto the fire and fuel their startup and scale up. But did you guys ever think about an outside investment and giving up equity? Was that something you came to easily? Was that a tough pill to swallow? Help me understand sort of how you arrived at that and what you felt like. Not necessarily what you thought, but what it felt like.
I think that when we reflected back on the 7 or 8 years and the opportunities that we've been approached with, and whether it's a big sponsor or an entity that wants to look at investing or buying or being a part of when we may have had the need or maybe we didn't have the need, it seemed like a much easier thing to consider to have the community be the investor as opposed to this one entity where we've evaluated before. What is that going to mean? What do they want? Do we still have the ability to let the community drive how this ends up being? And so it seemed like a really natural solution to that, as opposed to if we're going to continue to survive, do we accept something that really won't allow us to survive because it'll change what it is?
Yeah, so it sort of took the stinger out of having to go for outside funding, because that's what happens in many startups is when they take money, now they have someone to answer to that they didn't have to answer to before. And sometimes that's a good thing.
Right.
And other times it sort of changes the ethos and the culture of what the thing was about to begin with.
And that's what we really had to ask ourselves. If this is worth saving, what is it? And what does it mean to be saved? It means to be saved because of what it is, not to change it to what somebody else wants it to be.
That's pretty cool, the way you just said that. I'm in, let's put it that way. And so, what's interesting to me also is, as you talk about Treefort and the pivot and the solution you found, I know so many Treefort people, and they all strike me as very creative, the creative kind, right? All that to say, the creativity that started Treefort is what Boise Startup Week latched onto. So Startup Week is modeled after Treefort. Historically, we kind of looked at the way you guys set up your forts, how it was a bit chaotic, but intentionally that's what made it fun. That's our excuse as to why Startup Week is chaotic. It's intentional, but not really.
It's the crossover that makes everything magic.
Yeah, there you go. And so I will say that as an event that has carved its place out in this community over time, Boise Startup Week that is, we made a choice to pivot. We didn't quite have it as hard as you guys because we didn't have the venues, all the vendors, the artists, the talent. we didn't have as many stakeholders involved to where we could make a pretty quick decision. This is going to be a remote event.
Right.
We didn't have to reschedule it. But what you talked about is sort of a playbook that this may happen again, and who knows how Startup Week is going to look next year. And so, yeah, not only did Treefort help give birth to Startup Week, but you continue to be a role model on finding solutions when times are tough. I'm not going to say we'll do the exact same thing, but I guess my takeaway is just the fact that you were able to stay true to Treefort Music Festival as a community, a piece of our community that came from the community, for the community, and you went back to that same community to fund it for the future. And so talking about the future, as I understand it, there's going to be one in September, almost exactly a year from now.
A year from now, what were we doing then?
Okay. And then the follow-on Treefort is only 6 months out from that one.
Yeah, our intention is to go back to our regular schedule of the week after South by Southwest. So really it's going to maybe feel a lot like that first year where we start planning in September for the festival that happens in March. Only this time we'll be planning for September, also with the thought of the coming March. So those two festivals will be 6 months away from each other.
So Treefort lovers are going to get a double whammy.
Yeah,
But then we're going to go on.
Back to the March calendar.
Okay, so we'll have some withdrawals for a while, but back onto the March calendar.
You reset your anticipation, and
Okay.
I think though when you were talking about Tech Week, ask yourself, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? Are you being driven by what other people want, or are you being driven by what you want to show other people? And what I like that Tech Week has done, or Startup Week has done, is you've looked at both what you want to show about here and what's available and what can happen here, but also respond to what you see that people or entities want out of it. And that's probably a hard balance to keep. And so that's one thing we asked ourselves when things were really sticky is, why do we do this? What is the element that needs to survive this? And if it evolves through and innovates, that is the piece that needs to survive. That's the piece that needs to happen. What is that? And I think there are going to be a lot of industries and businesses that have to decide what is that thing that they love, what are they providing, what do they want to be on the other side of this? And it might not look the way it did before we went into this, but if you identify that part of it, it's a little bit easier, I think, to have something to shoot for.
And it's so easy to lose sight of the why, especially when you're under pressure, under financial pressure. And the sponsorship side for Startup Week, for example, to your point, we are intentional about the kind of content we curate, but we find our sponsors actually appreciate that. They don't want us to be just another business conference.
Right.
We're the unconference.
You're not just another HR conference.
Just not another HR conference.
Hiring conference.
No, HR is a small piece of it, but it's really not HR. It's more about talent, curating talent, and retaining talent in Boise. And it's not because I get paid for that, but if we retain talent here in Boise, they'll be hired by local businesses and they will be a part of the economic development story that we're trying to build. So very much aligned on the why.
But it seems like what you do is you find out what they like and what they want.
We have to. Otherwise, they wouldn't show up and consume the content.
And so it's a wonderful circular benefit. The evolution of how it became a community festival.
Yeah, forts everywhere.
And that people who felt the same way about Boise, but cared about their own passion, their own craft, whether it be craft beer or storytelling or creative writing or film or yoga or educating kids or things that kids like to do or art, or food, whatever their passion was, they felt the same way about Boise and that passion and wanted to contribute that. And so the formula was, the conversation in the formula was very similar. We want to take what's local and regional and national and bring it together and introduce them to one another. Show what's national and regional to what we have here, to who we have here, but also show who we have here, what's out there. And so that's how it was the birth of the the forts where they're collaborative with each other, because someone who writes a book may also be someone who is in hack fort, the tech realm, somebody who makes a film. It might also be a kid's film. So that's
So it's about the intersections of those forts.
That
then.
collaboration is one of my favorite parts of that.
Well, I could go on for at least another hour, but we're about out of time, and I wanted to make sure that I thank you for the time that you spent here tonight with us talking about Treefort Music Fest. The community is really thirsty for the next one, so no pressure, including me.
The community can help. So if you want to do that, I think that what feels good is that we've come up with a few different solutions where the community can participate in a way that hopefully satisfies how they want to participate.
Cheers to that.